In the parlor of the pilgrim and the four friends took their leave of the princess. She could not part from them lightly. She spoke with a faltering voice. 5 days ago I was in prison at Innsbruck, perpetually harassed and with no hope of release but in you. Now I am in Bologna, and free. I could not believe that any girl could find such friends except in fairyland. You make the world very sweet and clean to me. I should thank you. See my tears fall. Will you take them for my thanks? I have no words which can tell as much of my thoughts towards you. My little woman I keep with me, but to you gentlemen I would gladly give a token each, so that you may know I will never forget, and so that you too may keep for me a home within your memories. To Major Gaydon she gave a ring from off her finger, to Captain Misset a chain which she wore about her neck, to O'Toole, her 6'4", as she said between laughter and tears, her watch. Each with a word of homage took his leave. Clementina spoke to Wogan last of all, and when the room was empty but for these two. To you, my friend, said she, I give nothing. There is no need. But I ask for something. I, page 301, would be in debt to you still deeper than I am. I ask for a handkerchief which I dropped from my shoulders one evening under the stars upon the road to Allah. Wogan bowed to her without a word. He drew the handkerchief from his breast slowly. It is true, said he, I have no right to it, and he gave it back. But his voice showed that he was hurt. You do not understand, said she, with a great gentleness. You have every right which the truest loyalty can confer. I ask you for this handkerchief, because I think it times to wear it in memory of a white stone on which I could safely set my foot, for the stone was not straw. Wogan could not trust his voice to answer her. He took her hand to lift it to his lips. No, said she, as at Innsbruck, an honest handclasp, if you please. Wogan joined his 3 companions in the road, and they stood together for a little, recounting to one another the incidents of the flight. Here's a great work ended, said Gaydon at last. We shall be historical, said O'Toole. It is my one ambition. I want to figure in the history books and be a great plague and nuisance to children at school. I would sooner be cursed daily by schoolboys than have any number of golden statues in galleries. It means the more solid reputation, and then he became silent. Gaydon had, besides, page 302, his joy at the rescue of Clementina, a private satisfaction that matters which were none of his business had had no uncomfortable issue. Misset, too, was thankful for that his wife had come safely to the journey's end. O'Toole alone had a weight upon his mind, and when Gaydon said, well, we may go to bed and sleep without alarms till sundown tomorrow, he remarked, There's Jenny. It was on my account she ventured with us. That's true, said Wogan, but we shall put an end to her captivity, now we are safe at Bologna. I have friends here who can serve me so far, I have no doubt. O'Toole was willing to leave the matter in Wogan's hands. If Wogan once pledged himself to Jenny's release, why, Jenny was released, and he went to bed now with a quite equable mind. Wogan hurried off to the palace of the Cardinal Origo, whom he found sitting at his supper. The Cardinal welcomed Wogan back very warmly. I trust, Your Eminence, said Wogan, that Farini is now at Bologna. You come in the nick of time, replied the Cardinal. This is his last week. There is a great demand for the seats, but you will see to it, Mr. Wogan, that the box is in the first tier. There was to be a dinner, too, if I recollect aright. I have not dined for days. Your Eminence, I shall be extraordinarily hungry. You will order what you will, Mr. Wogan. I, page 303, am a man of a small appetite and have no preferences. Your Eminence's cook will be the better judge of what is seasonable. Your Eminence will be the more likely to secure the box in the first tier. Shall we fix a day? Tomorrow, if it please you. Tomorrow I shall have the honor, then, to be your Eminence's guest. The Cardinal started up from the table and stared at his visitor. You are jesting, said he. So little, replied Wogan, that Her Highness, the Princess Clementina, is now at the Pilgrim Inn at Bologna. In Bologna, cried the Cardinal, and he stood frowning in a great perturbation of spirit. This is great news, he said, but in a doubtful voice which Wogan did not understand. This is great news, to be sure, and he took a turn or two across the room. Not wholly pleasant news, one might almost think, said Wogan, in some perplexity. Never was better news, exclaimed the Cardinal, hastily, a trifle too hastily, it seemed to Wogan. But it surprises one. Even the king did not expect this most desirable issue. For the king's in Spain. It is that which troubles me. Her Highness comes to Bologna, and the king's in Spain. Yes, said Wogan, with a wary eye upon his Eminence. Why is the king in Spain? Page 304. There is pressing business in Spain, an expedition from Cadiz. The king's presence there was urged most earnestly. He had no hope you would succeed. I myself have some share in the blame. I did not hide from you my thought, Mr. Wogan. Wogan was not all reassured. He could not but remember that the excuse for the king's absence which the Cardinal now made to him was precisely that which he himself had invented to appease Clementina at Innsbruck. It was the simple, natural excuse which came first of all to the tongue's tip, but it did not satisfy. There was, besides, too much flurry and agitation in the Cardinal's manner. Even now that he was taking snuff, he spilled the most of it from the trembling of his fingers. Moreover, he must give reason upon reason for his perturbation the while he let his supper get cold. Her Highness I cannot but feel will have reason to think slightly of our welcome. A young girl, she will expect, and rightly, something more of ceremony as her due. Your Eminence does not know her, interrupted Wogan, with some sharpness. His Eminence was adroit enough to seize the occasion of ending a conversation which was growing with every minute more embarrassing. I shall make haste to repair my defect, said he. I beg you to present my duty to Her Highness and to request her to receive me tomorrow at page 305, 10. By that, I will hope to have discovered a lodging more suitable to her dignity. Wogan made his prayer for the Pope's intervention on Jenny's behalf and then returned to the Pilgrim Inn, dashed and fallen in spirit. He had thought that their troubles were at an end, but here was a new difficulty at which in truth he rather feared to guess. The Chevalier's departure to Spain had been a puzzle to him before. He remembered now that the Chevalier had agreed with reluctance to his enterprise, and had never been more than lukewarm in its support. That reluctance, that lukewarmness, he had attributed to a natural habit of discouragement, but the evasiveness of Cardinal Origo seemed to propose a different explanation. Wogan would not guess at it. The king is to marry the princess, said he, fiercely. I brought her out of Innsbruck to Bologna. The king must marry the princess, and, quite unawares, he set off running towards the inn. As he drew near to it, he heard a confused noise of shouting. He quickened his pace, and rushing out of the mouth of a side street into the square where the inn stood, came suddenly to a stop. The square was filled with a great mob of people, and in face of the inn the crowd was so thick Wogan could have walked upon the shoulders. Many of the people carried blazing torches, which they waved in the air, dropping the burning resin upon their companions. Others threw their hats skywards. Here were boys beating drums, and grown men, page 306, blowing upon toy trumpets, and all were shouting and cheering with a deafening enthusiasm. The news of the princess's arrival had spread like wildfire through the town. Wogan's spirits rose at a bound. Here was a welcome very different from the cardinal's. Wogan rejoiced in the good sense of the citizens of Bologna who could appreciate the great qualities of his chosen woman. Their enthusiasm did them credit, he could have embraced them one by one. He strove to push his way towards the door, but he would hardly have pierced through the throng had not a man by the light of a torch recognized him and bawled out his name. He was lifted shoulder high in a second, he was passed from hand to hand over the heads of the people, he was set tenderly down in the very doorway of the Pilgrim Inn, and he found Clementina at the window of an unlighted room gazing unperceived at the throng. "Here's a true welcome, madam," said he, cordially, with his thoughts away upon that bluff of hillside where the acclamations had seemed so distant and unreal. It is possible that they seemed of small account to Clementina now, for though they rang in ears and were visible to her eyes, she sat quite unmoved by them. "This is one tiny square in a little town," he continued. "But its shouts will ring across Europe," and she turned her head to him and said quietly, "The king is still in Spain, is he not?"